Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Local Food Waste Prevention Campaigns, a potent source of economic and climate benefits. A free webinar brought to you by the Maryland Recycling Network. I'm Peter Haustel, MRN's Executive Director, and will soon be joined by Carol Jones, Tony Staubach, and Leslie Baesens, who will share their experiences with successful behavior change campaigns to drive food waste prevention at the local level. But before we go there, let's take a minute to look at what's coming up on our calendar. On Thursday, April 24th, Lisa Schianella will give us a tour of HELPC's new textile facility in Upper Marlboro. And on Tuesday, May 20th, you can help us drive reuse in Maryland by volunteering with us at Community Forklift in Hyattsville. Registration for these events is open now, and you can sign up online. We've also scheduled a tour of the Eco City Farm in Bladensburg on July 15th. Registration will be open for that event soon. And of course, on Monday, June 9th, I sure hope to see you at the Turf Valley Conference Center for the 2025 MRN SWANA Mid-Atlantic Conference. You can see the preliminary program on the website, and exhibit sales along with registration are open now. So be sure to check out the website for details and sign up today. On the admin side of things, please feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll be posting a recording of the webinar on our website next week, which you're welcome to share with any and all who might be interested. So while most of these programs are free, they depend on the financial support of our members. So let me start by offering a big thank you to all of our current members. Though, as I'm sure you've heard me say many times before, and I'm going to say it again, we don't have any non-members. We just have paying members and non-paying members. So if you're one of those non-paying members, please head over to our website after this program and join today. You can become a member, a paying member that is, for as little as $25 a year. That's like 50 cents a week. Thank you. And speaking of support, I want to give a shout out to our sustaining and patron members whose contributions, along with that of all our members, help us continue to support your efforts to drive reduction, reuse, and recycling. Okay, without further ado, it's time to turn the mic and the screen over to our presenters. Carol, you're up first, so please take it away.
Thank you so much, Peter. And to all who joined us, welcome to Food Waste Prevention Week. I'm very grateful to Peter and MRN for hosting this exciting webinar today as part of the week. If you're not familiar, Food Waste Prevention Week has developed over the past few years into a national movement to educate and inspire real behavioral change to reduce wasted food. There's a lot happening this week, both with online webinars like this, as well as in-person events, and I've included some links underneath the title. The top one has activities posted at the national level, the second one is around the state, and the third one is in the DMV. Next slide, Peter. As co-director of the Environmental Law Institute Food Waste Initiative, I want to just take a minute to highlight the resources that we have available. For those of you who are not familiar with the ERLI, we are an environmental NGO. We work both in the domestic and international arenas, and we provide legal and policy research, education, and publications. Our food waste initiative, which I co-lead with Linda Bregan, provides model governance tools and capacity building resources designed to help state and local governments, businesses, and communities adopt practices and policies to reduce wasted food. Relevant to today's topic, I want to highlight our food waste prevention resource guides. It's a series that provides ready-to-use, evidence-based resources for classroom teachers, households, and workplaces on specific food waste prevention strategies such as date labels, storage, and freezing. We also have a whole series of model ordinances, executive orders, and policies that we have developed in collaboration with the Natural Resources Defense Council, and you can see a few of them listed there. But we have other resources, and I'd like to refer you to our webpage to check them out. Next slide, please. Today, we are very fortunate excuse me, pollen-related throat crud. We are very fortunate to have two speakers who are leaders in developing food waste prevention campaigns, Leslie Baesens in Denver and Tony Staubach in Hamilton County, Ohio. Everyone in the audience, I imagine, knows how hard it is to change household behavior. For example, to expand adoption of recycling, whether we're talking about traditional recyclables or food scraps. Leslie and Tony have been experimenting with different approaches for promoting prevention and evaluating their efficacy over a number of years. And they will be sharing their insights about what works and what doesn't work. So my role today is to highlight why we're focusing on food waste prevention campaigns. So if you're here, you are probably already convinced that food waste is an urgent problem, and you may be familiar with some of the stats on the page. About a third of food is uneaten, with waste occurring along the supply chain from farmers to consumers. This poses a serious economic problem. You may not actually have seen the latest estimate of the financial hit families take due to wasted food. With inflation, US EPA has basically doubled the estimate so that the cost is almost $3,000 per year. Food waste is also a food insecurity problem. While about 70% of wasted food is edible, i.e. not banana peels, 1 in 7 Americans are food insecure. Next slide, please. It's also an environmental problem. Producing uneaten food waste wastes the natural resources used to produce it, and it creates greenhouse gas emissions, particularly in landfills and due to the land use change to produce food that is uneaten. New slide. So what can we do about it? The familiar hierarchy has at the top, prevent wasted food scraps to begin with. Next is rescue or recover high quality nutritious food to feed hungry people, or if lesser quality, to feed animals. And finally, recycle any food scraps that are remaining. New slide, please. I find that when many people hear food waste reduction, they think recycling, and in particular, composting. But it's important to include prevention strategies in our toolkit because prevention is so much more powerful in terms of its total economic and greenhouse gas mitigation benefits. It's much lower cost per ton than composting, and it can yield 8 to 10 times the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per ton relative to composting. Now, we need to recognize that the potential tons that can be composted are substantially lower than with recycling, so it's not a substitute, but it can reduce the scale of the recycling capacity that we need to invest in. And as you know, those investments are very costly. So why are prevention benefits per ton so much higher than recycling? For one, it's because the savings in resource use, financial expenditures, and greenhouse gas emissions accumulate all along the supply chain from farm to disposal, compared to recycling, where the savings are occurring just at the end of the supply chain. The other important point made in the literature is that household behavior change campaigns are the top prevention strategy in terms of preventing wasted food. This is because households generate the largest share of food waste. So that is the answer to the question why we're focusing on food waste prevention campaigns and why we've asked Leslie and Tony to talk about their lessons learned. But before I turn it over to our two terrific speakers, I want to just highlight a few Maryland stats. We just have out in the last month or two, 2 new state reports that tell us, one, food waste is the largest waste stream, which is a fairly consistent finding over time, and that suggests that its share has increased from 2016 to 2024 relative to other waste streams, though, to be honest, the differences are not that large and may not be statistically significant. We also know that the recycling rate is low relative to our 2035 voluntary target rate. Comparing the estimate over the last few years, it's actually jumped around quite a bit. So there's really no clear trend there. But finally, prevention focuses on the quantity of food waste that is generated, regardless of its disposition. Next slide. I was chagrined to see that Maryland ranks in the top 3 states in terms of the quantity of wasted food per household based on the MITRE-Gallup National Survey of 10,000 households. So the bottom line here is Maryland has much potential for expanding our prevention, recovery, and recycling of wasted food scraps. So thank you very much, and I would like to turn it over to Leslie now.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm with Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. I've been in that position for about 6 years, and I'm the Food Resiliency and Food Waste Program Administrator for the City and County of Denver. And so in that capacity, I essentially do everything that's not composting, and that is to say prevention work. And I'll tell you a bit more about how we got here. So to set the stage, Denver has a food vision document. So it's a document that was created with extensive community input, and it lays out a plan until 2030 to make Denver's food system more resilient, healthy, vibrant, and inclusive. And as part of that document, we have a food waste reduction target, which is 57% by 2030. So that by no means is supposed to be all prevention, because that would actually be really crazy, because I don't think I've ever heard of somebody being quite that successful, but prevention is a piece of it. I did want to mention that DOTI, or Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, when the Food Vision was created, was offering a compost pickup program to select household. By that, I mean household had to opt into the program and pay a fee to get their compost picked up. Since then, we have gone to what we call expanded waste services, aka pay as you throw, and now composting is offered for free to all residents who choose to have the city pick that up. So that's going to be part of achieving that target. And then the other piece is going beyond composting to increasing prevention. So the city applied for a grant back, I think, in 2018 with the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, big environmental NGO. And that's how my position was created, and that's how we got started on this work. So I wanted to start with a little poll. If you paid attention to what Carol was saying, that should not be too difficult to answer. Who wastes the most food in Denver? Is it household, grocery store, restaurants, or schools? And I would invite you to put your answers in the chat. And actually, if someone could, let me see, I think, okay, I can see the chat, so. Anyone? Households?
Yeah.
Okay, grocery stores, households. I'll give it 10 more seconds if you want to venture a guess. We do hear that people with kids waste more food because kids, make food waste management difficult. Okay, so the majority of you said household, and you are correct. And this really tracks with nationwide. So this is for Denver specifically. This is based on an NRDC report that was released in 2017. And as you can see in the green, our households by far outweigh any other sector in terms of how much food waste they generate. So that is exactly why Denver chose to focus most of its efforts, its food waste prevention efforts, on households. And here's how we got started. So it was important for us to adopt a community-based social marketing approach, which is to say going beyond just one-way information to actually trying to use nudges and change social norms to get people to actually change behavior at home. And according to the community-based social marketing, so CBSM methodology, focus group is a first step in hearing from residents what are their specific challenges and barriers to reducing food waste. So we partnered with a community-based organization in Denver, and they ran these focus group. We gathered 68 residents across multiple focus groups. They were mostly from lower income communities. So it was a majority of Hispanic residents and some Black American residents. These residents oftentimes got food from food banks and pantries. And the reason for going with a lower income population is because I do work for the Department of Public Health, and it's important for us to focus our programs on, a broad subset of our population. And in terms of food waste, that particular population had not really been targeted yet. So we wanted to hear specifically from them what their challenges are and how we could help them solve these challenges. So what we heard is what we kind of already suspected. Food is wasted across income levels, but for different reasons. So in particular, some of the challenges specific to these populations are the scarcity mindsets. So folks that were raised in households that were food insecure are much more likely, when they do have access to food, to over-prepare or over-purchase because they are afraid to, like, when is the next time they'll be able to have access to food. There's also challenges tied to how people shop. If you have difficulties going to the grocery store because you're in a neighborhood that does not have easy access and you may not have a car, when you do go to the grocery store, you tend to take advantage of deals, or you over-purchase because you don't know the next time. You may not go back for another 2 weeks. So that also leads to waste in terms of like expiration dates. Sometimes if you over-rely on those, you may be wasting food that would still be good to eat, or you're purchasing too much and you can't get through it. So this is what we had in mind when we designed our interventions. And so what did we do? Here are some of our collaterals. So we gave people a bin, and you can see it on the right side of the screen. I'm holding it. And so on that bin, we had 2 points of information. One is a sticker that says, "Eat this first," in both English and Spanish, was one on each side of the bin. And the purpose is to put in that bin items that need to be consumed in priority. This is particularly helpful for households that have kids, where the mom is usually the primary food preparer, and sometimes it's difficult for the family to know what is a leftover, what should we eat first, so you use that bin for that purpose. On that sticker was also information about date labels and how to interpret that, and essentially to rely on your senses instead of the date on the package. So these collaterals went into this bag. We also had a flyer and a letter. We also supplied reusable stickers, which are essentially static clings that you can put and reuse over and over on food containers. So these were distributed door to door. We have done to date 3 campaigns. One was during COVID, so it was a little bit challenging. So what I'm going to present today is focused on the last 2 campaigns that we have done, because those use similar methodology. And in total, we have given out these bags to 3,500 households. So some in person, going door to door, others at community events or food distribution events at food banks and pantries. We also did a little bit of an ad campaign. So we had these ads in bus shelters and bus benches in limited neighborhoods where we were essentially distributing the bags. They feature residents providing actionable food waste prevention tips. And, they're well-regarded members of the community. So we were hoping for some recognition and feeling that connection to these residents, that if they can do it, well, you can do it too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, so after we got these material distributed, how did we evaluate if our campaign worked? We did it 2 ways. One is through surveys that, again, were administered door to door, and to a control group, so a bunch of people who did not get our materials, and an intervention group, so a subset of the people who did get our materials. Similarly, we did waste audits, so went through the alleys and collected trash and sorted them off-site. Again, a baseline assessment in terms of like before distributing the campaign materials for both a control and an intervention group, and then a post-implementation sort for a control and intervention group. So 2 waste sorts. And I will present you the results. What I wanted to say also is that the residents did not know that they were opting into a campaign. So they were given the materials, but there was never a point at which they chose to receive the materials. What we wanted to do is just try to do something that could be scaled up. So we did not want to have to deal with having people opt in or having to give incentives for participation, because our objective was really to see what can we make work where we could just do a broad distribution as funding becomes available. So for the waste audits, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but one of our challenges is that people did not know their waste was being audited. So the waste was being picked up once it was in the alley, behind people's homes, and the the reason for not telling them is that we did not want them to change behavior. We wanted to see exactly what was happening after getting these materials and whether or not there was any difference in the amount of food waste that they generated. Before I tell you fully the results, here's a breakdown of the demographics. So following on the steps of the focus groups, we were in a lower income neighborhood. So in terms of the makeup, the demographic makeup was 67% Hispanic, so vast majority of Hispanic residents. And then in terms of income, you can see it's pretty low income. So 3/4 of our residents made less than $50,000 per household or less. I can tell you that Denver is an expensive place to live. And if you make, as a household, less than $50,000, you're going to have a hard time usually affording food. And so this is something we noticed also as part of, we had a separate question asking how often people relied on food banks and pantries for their food needs. And a lot of, I think it was 40% of residents made use of the food banks and pantries. So this is one of the questions we asked in our survey, and this is a little bit to set the stage for you all. So we asked, how much food do you throw away in a typical week? And as you can see here, between 1/5 to 1/3 of people said they don't throw away any food. No food waste there, nothing to see. And then the rest, in the yellow, a small amount. So in total, between 86 and 96% of people said they either don't throw away any food or throw away a small amount of food. So let's see how that squares out with what we found in the trash. So again, I'm going to encourage you to use the chat. How many pounds of food do you think the average Denver household wastes each week? 3, 5, 8, or 11 pounds? And I'll give you 30 seconds to put your answers in the chat. We got some 8, 11. So definitely picking from the higher end of that scale. All right, 8. All right, well, you are correct if you said 8. So yes, our waste audits. Oh, and I forgot to say all of the pictures on the slides are from our waste audits. I was going to say that at the beginning, and I totally forgot. But if you were struck by any of the pictures, I took all of these photos when we were auditing people's trash. So yes, 8 pounds. And this was one of our audits. There's been some where the average was higher than that. There's been some where the average was 14 pounds over the course of like the waste sorts. The second one we did, I think it was closer to 11 pounds. So 8 was actually on the lower end of what we saw aggregated. And fun fact, the highest amount of food found in the trash during an audit was 57.5 pounds. So we literally found 57 pounds of food in somebody's trash. And that was by no means an outlier. I'm laughing, but it really was not funny. So there's multiple examples of, people having just insane amount of food in the trash. Some of it is like,
quick question was, I'm seeing foods that are wrapped in the food store packaging.
Yeah.
Were these foods that were thrown out because they were past the sale date, or do you have any idea?
No, that's really hard to know. So some of it I suspect, because when I was there, I was looking at the dates and, we did the sorts, essentially like if people put their trash out on Monday, that was sorted that afternoon. And so they probably wasted it in the week prior. I think some of it, like you see in the second image, might have been somebody moving, or somebody who did just a general like fridge and freezer cleanup and was like, this has been in my freezer for too long, it's freezer burn, I'm just going to toss it. That's my theory. Some of it, I'm really puzzled. Like those apples, they look totally fine. So we found like potatoes that weren't sprouted or soft or anything. We found like jugs of milk. Those I suspect were probably past date. But yes, I couldn't tell you for sure, but I suspect the date did have a role to play in this.
Thank you.
Yep. So here's what we found in the waste audit. So I realize this is a little bit overwhelming, but essentially if you look at the first 2 columns, so the control is on the left, the treatment is on the right. And So we're looking at edible food waste. So we measure edible and inedible. And like Carol said, about 70% of the food wasted is edible, and that tracks with what we found in Denver. About 70% of the food that people waste could have been eaten. So as you can see between the blue bar and the orange bar on the left side of each of the graphs, there has been a reduction between the baseline audit and the post-implementation audit. However, the effect was not big enough to be able to say, it's not statistically significant, and so we could not attribute it to our campaign. The reason I'm showing you this is because this is just to highlight how difficult it is to do measurement for a campaign like this. I'm going to show you much more promising results moving forward with our surveys, but the waste audit were inconclusive. And we don't really know why. It could be that we did not sample a large enough number of trash. We had, in this audit, I think we had 120 trash that we sampled on each time. And so I think it's about 60-40 breakdown with the treatment was about 60% of what we sampled and control about 40% of what we sampled. So it could be that. It could be that we should have left a longer amount of time between distributing our materials and auditing waste, or a short amount of time. We don't really know. And because not a lot of people have done this, because these audits are expensive, and I'll talk about cost in just a few slides, it's also, it's difficult to, it would have been hard for us to do more audits and to know what other people may have tried, because a lot of people just don't do it because it's too expensive. So I just have a question mark. This is not for you to not try this approach, because I think it's definitely worthwhile, but I'm showing you this for you to question how you may want to do these audits if you were to choose to do that. But we got way better results with our surveys. And we did a control group and an intervention group. The first thing that was super encouraging to us is that 80% of people who recalled receiving our materials used our materials. And that way exceeded expectations, because again, these people just got a bag dropped at their doorstep. And, some of them got a little spiel if they were home when the canvassers came by, but some of them just got the bag when they came home from work one day. And so the fact that many people used their materials was hugely encouraging to us. Of the materials given, people loved the storage bin. And so this was across, because we did two sets of surveys and across, so for the two main campaigns we did, one in 22, one in 24. And yeah, people loved the bin. We tried to pick a bin that wouldn't be too big, would be a good size for the fridge, but large enough that people could put items in it. And it seems we hit the mark. So people really like the bin. People also like the Eat This First stickers. They were less used than the bin, but this is still a pretty encouraging number of people using those. So here's another encouraging find, is that, so the intervention group is in the blue, and the intervention treatment group was significantly less likely to report throwing away all food items, so across all food categories compared to the control group. So what we asked here is how often items were thrown away in the last 2 weeks. And you can see the results. It's particularly significant for leftovers, which was one of the target behaviors of the campaign, but also produce, which is often wasted. Then similarly, the intervention group was also much more likely to report eating their leftovers and eating food past its printed date. And when we did survey people in terms of like how their behaviors had changed with regards to reliance on the date label, in the treatment group, people were much more likely to report that they were not as often throwing away food that was past date. So it seems our messaging did work. So moving on from that, I just wanted to give you a quick note about funding and logistics in case this intrigues you. And for us, we have done all this work using grant funding. As I mentioned at the very beginning, NRDC gave us a grant that got us started on this work, but then we applied for grants with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And so thanks to both of these grants, we were able to run a campaign each time. And each time we do a campaign, we use the learnings to try to modify the way we conduct the campaign next time and tweak the survey a little bit and the materials and things like that. And if you are interested in getting grant funding for this, I think anything that's related to obviously waste management, but also to climate, although I realize with the current administration, like funding for that might be a little bit up in the air, and I can't speak to that because of course nobody knows what that's going to look like, but that's what we were looking at. So we work closely with Public Works, and I'm guessing most of the people here today are in Public Works. I'm kind of an outlier because I'm in the Department of Public Health, so I had to rely on my very nice and patient colleagues at Public Works to help with the waste audits. We did hire a consultant to do that, but in terms of like helping us with the trash routes and the location outside to store the waste and all of that. So they've been instrumental in that. In terms of cost, so for about 2,500 packs of materials, and we have distributed more than that, but I looked at like that once, the last grant we got, I looked at the cost for that one for purpose of reporting on this. So we spent $60,000 for 2,500 packets of materials, all included. So design, printing, assembly, the surveys, and grants to our community-based organizations who distributed these packets, both door-to-doors and at community events. The cost would obviously go down if you repeat the campaigns, because once you land on the material that you like, you don't have design costs, you don't have translation costs anymore. Your printing costs are going to go down in terms like the higher the quantity of materials that you distribute. So there is some cost savings to be realized with subsequent campaigns. And then you can see the cost of those waste audits, $70,000 for 2 audits. So these are it's 180 homes, which I know I said before, we did like 120. That was the second, for the campaign we did in 2024, we surveyed 180 homes. And so that was how much we spent. In terms of like staff time, this was all me. So it was just one person. So this also, it kind of depends if you have a team of people working on this, but I did all the recruiting of, looking for these vendors and getting quotes and all of that. That was just one person salary for that. And we contracted with graphic designer, community-based social marketing firm to provide guidance on the methodology, the community-based organizations, the surveyor. So it's a lot of contract work and a lot of just little things to do. But I just wanted to give you an idea. And then one final thing. This is one of the collaterals we produce, and I do see the questions in the chat too. So we produced this best practice guide. This is after we did our focus groups, and we realized that so many residents get food from food banks and pantries, and it leads to so much waste. And this was confirmed also in our surveys, because we asked in the 2024 campaign more pointed questions about the rates of people who get food from food banks and pantries and how often they waste that food. And it's not insignificant. And that may also have played out into our waste audit results. It's just, if people get food from food banks or pantries and they get a pre-made box, a not insignificant percent of that food goes to waste. And this is because people are being given food that they are not familiar with. Like if you're from Central or South America, a winter squash is a really puzzling food item. So they don't know what to do with it. If they really have the time, they may look up a recipe, but then sometimes they're given a whole bunch of butternut squash and it's unfamiliar enough that they'll make soup, but then they would tell me, it's only so many times I can make butternut squash soup. So things like that. So this is where we're trying to take these learnings and also talk to food banks and pantries to really try to get them to think about matching what they're offering to their audience. And so yes, if you get a majority of South and Central Americans, maybe try to not offer winter squash as often, or give them recipes, or have a little cooking demo. We also encourage the use of share tables like they do in school. So essentially having a place at the food distribution point where people can leave behind the food they don't want or need, because they're also sometimes giving stuff that they just can't make use of. I was just learning this year at a food distribution event, people being given several jars of vegan mayo. And I don't care how much you like mayo, but like there's only so much mayonnaise a person can use. So if you're giving people like 4 or 5 jars, what are they going to do with that? So, and finally, date label education, because a lot of the food that's given to residents is past date because that's what they get. That food is perfectly safe to eat, but a lot of people getting that food at these distribution events don't know that. So this is where it kind of like comes full circle, and we're trying to do that education with our food banks and pantries as well. And that's it for me. And I don't know, Carol and Peter, if you wanted to answer the questions now or just wait until after Tony goes.
Well, let's see. I think the couple of questions there are pretty specific to your presentation. Carol was asking about the intervention. Was it, can you talk a bit more about the nature and the extent of your interaction?
Yeah, so that's where the canvassers came in. They had a little spiel essentially. So when people did open their door, they were able to answer questions. So people had to use the materials and why the city was doing that. So, but I think also in terms of the interaction, what I meant is also the fact that we provided actual physical material instead of just having like an ad campaign or a social media campaign. There was actual materials being given that could be used to reduce food waste at home and overcome some of these challenges.
Okay.
And people also, the other thing too, in our surveys, people were super excited that the city's working on it. And I think that's worth mentioning, is that when we were kind of asking and people would leave comments, they really were excited that the city was taking this on.
Okay. And then Richard wanted to know about the edible word.
Yes. Okay. Edible when purchased. So if somebody's throwing something away that, let's say you bought oranges and they're moldy, those are edible because you could have eaten these oranges. So what was considered not edible for our survey was purely things that you could not eat, like banana peels, though I know there are recipes out there to make banana peel bacon, but not that. So not, banana peel, avocado peels, bones, like things that really under in no culture you would eat. So that was really it. So if a food was past date, that would have been considered edible as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you, Leslie. And Tony, you're up.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tony Staubach. I am the Food Waste Diversion Specialist for Hamilton County Resource. We are the solid waste district that covers Hamilton County, Ohio, which is the third largest county in Ohio. We have the city of Cincinnati in our region. We serve 47 political jurisdictions, and we're part of the largest metropolitan statistical area in Ohio. Although our direct reach is around 900,000 people, there are close to 3 million people in our metro region, and obviously folks close to us in Columbus, Indianapolis, Louisville, Lexington, and Dayton, Ohio, who also utilize and benefit from the privately owned landfill that we host in our county. So my focus is on developing strategies that reduce food waste and reduce wasted food. This presentation focuses specifically on our campaign, our marketing campaign to reach out to residents in our county. It is one tool in a tool belt that we use. There are a multitude of ways that we reach the community and educate them. But this is our Wasted Food Stops With Us campaign. It was developed in 2001, right about the same time I started, and I stepped into this role to manage this marketing effort. Prior to my work with Hamilton County Resource, I was an extension educator. I managed a legislative initiative for OSU Extension with Cincinnati Public Schools, and I developed an agricultural redevelopment program for a private college who I still work for as an instructor. So that's Wilmington College. I work there as a global issues instructor. So I come with a lot of experience in the food system. Why is it not moving forward? There we go. Hamilton County, we have a really low rate of food waste that goes into the landfill compared to the national average. So only about 14% of Hamilton County's waste is food. We write a solid waste plan every 5 years, and we evaluate and conduct a waste composition analysis, both commercially and residentially, to understand what's going into the landfill. From the residential side, about 14% is waste, as food waste. 14% also happens to be yard and garden waste, and like 20% is fiber. So some of that It's cardboard. So it's a lot of fun to look at the waste that's being generated in Hamilton County and understand that waste. We also do a lot of work to understand our county population, what they feel, what they see, what they think, what they believe, what they want. And so we conduct a lot of analyses and in partnership with universities, with marketing firms, because we run a number of campaigns as a solid waste district on a number of waste reduction strategies, food being this one. So this was a partnership we had with a marketing firm that went out and asked our community, what are the largest issues facing your family? And we found that most people are concerned about money, the economy, and mental health. So when we asked people specifically, when you're throwing things away, what are your worries? People responded, money, the economy, and mental health. So we took that to heart. We took that to understand that people want to save money. They are worried about the state of the economy, and they also are seeking togetherness. And this is a really weird thing to talk about when you're talking about a marketing campaign around reducing food waste. People don't want to be alone. People are feeling isolated, and that is a major issue in their lives. It is something that we're trying to take into us and take it internally and understand as we develop strategies in our community. We also were seeking information about values. We are a Midwestern city on the edge of a Southern state, so we weren't really sure what we were going to get, but we asked people their values, and we found these really useful and insightful. People generally value friendship, helpfulness, working hard, enjoying life, and having fun and open-mindedness were tied. A marketing company that we worked with really liked the having fun model, and we're like, no, we're a government. We like open-mindedness. Please, we need people to be open-minded. So we went ahead and worked with those 6 values as we designed our campaigns. We also asked people to tell us the things that they don't value. It was the same list, obviously. So we're looking at what's at the bottom of that list. The ones that were really important for us to understand that people don't value, that sometimes enter into our efforts and our work, things that have resonated and worked well in other waste reduction strategies that we need to understand will not work well when we're talking about reducing wasted food. People don't value preserving the environment. That was very sad for us. We're a solid waste district. That is part of our mandate, is to reduce dependence on the landfill. So I mean, it's really sad to see that people were not valuing the environment. People don't value romance in Greater Cincinnati, which was really shocking. We've had a number of campaigns that have focused on, togetherness and couples and romance. And when it comes to food, that's not people's driving value. Being in nature, people don't value being in nature. And these are very common values that are not really appreciated in the Midwest, but social recognition and power. People aren't seeking social recognition by reducing wasted food, and they're not seeking power. And so we use the COM-B model to analyze the results from a multitude of surveys. And so that's capability, opportunity, and motivation. And using that model, we found a number of findings and the beginnings of a lot of strategies to consider. So capabilities, people consume familiar foods and people don't plan meals. So we've had a number of campaigns in the past that focused on meal plans, meal prepping, shopping lists. We never really found a model focused on those strategies that resonated with folks. And our findings shared that same experience. People don't plan meals. They go to the grocery store, they buy the same things every week, or they participate in a CSA, or they're going to a pantry and they just take what they can get. People are generally consuming the same foods on a regular basis. They're not making intense shopping lists. They're not planning their meals. We've had some success telling people to shop their pantry, but shopping lists has not resonated well in this region. I will also say Kroger is headquartered here. They've had some success with meal prepping, with shopping lists through their targeted apps, and we've had conversations, about the overlap there. So there is some future opportunity we might consider, but in particular for this campaign, we did not find that that was going to be a strategy that was going to resonate with the community. Opportunities, we obviously were aware that finances drive decisions. We've tried to tell people that, wasted food is worth X number of dollars, which a couple of years ago when I did an analysis in Cincinnati, that was about $1,800. I would guess that's as high as $2,500 now, which makes sense with what the EPA just released. Our cost of food in Cincinnati is lower than in most markets. We live within a day's drive of like 90% of the food that's produced in the United States. So it's our cost is fairly low here. So having the conversation about how much money people are wasting was not driving behavior change, but it is a factor that people continue to think about, but usually at point of sale. And infrastructure drives behavior. And this was really clear in some of the questions around infrastructure in people's kitchens that they were using. There were some pointed questions for these groups, for these focus groups. And one of the questions was, if you know, do you have an air fryer? Do you use it? Yes. Do you have a fridge? Do you use it? Yes. If they have infrastructure, they use infrastructure. And so infrastructure can drive behavior. So as Leslie was explaining, you know, people really like the storage container. We know that if people have storage containers, they use storage containers. And then motivation, environment is a poor motivator. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to will people to reduce wasted food because, you know, it's bad for the environment. That's not a message they want to hear. They don't want to hear the doom and gloom. They also are seeking connection. It was very clear that people want to be connected. And so that led us to design our Wasted Food Stops With Us campaign. And so the campaign is built on 4 very clear strategies of shopping, serving, sharing, and storing. This gives us the flexibility to pull different levers when we find that there are strategies that could work in a particular community or with a particular population or a particular partner. But we really built our campaign around the idea of educating people at the highest level of making better purchasing practices. That works really well when we work with schools and we're talking about budgeting skills. It works really well when we're dealing with, you know, middle-class consumers who are, you know, buying for the family. We can have some example shopping lists for them. Serving good food is really a fun strategy. That's when we hire chefs. They go out and teach people to make things. That's where we have a lot of partners who are upcycling food. And so it really can engage them in that conversation. We also have our storage tactic, which has been our most successful marketing campaign, and I'll share some of that collateral after this. And then Share the Bounty is really a reminder for all of us to be a part of a community. That's where we engage our messaging around volunteerism, where, you know, we're asking people to volunteer for a food recovery partner so they can understand to be a bigger part of the system. We're encouraging people to, you know, make meals for family and friends. This becomes a big part of our conversation during the holiday seasons. But our Wasted Food Stops With the campaign really is built on those 4 pillars of shopping, serving, sharing, and storing. We do have a website that serves as the hub for this campaign, again, built around those topics. We also have Scoop, which is our blog where we share different information that's pertinent to the topic. It's just a website, wastedfoodstopswithus.org. We share that out. People use it all the time. We do have a very robust food storage guide on there. It is all based on USDA, FDA, extension research on how to best store food items. We are a government agency. We want to reduce liability. We want to make sure we recognize the people who came up with this research. So we use only research-based approaches to educate and encourage people to reduce wasted food. If those aren't available, we go back to the manufacturer and seek out that information. And that's important because it has been our most successful campaign. So last winter, I had to think for a minute. So around the holiday season, we launched a marketing campaign around reducing wasted food through storage tactics. It generated some great results. So we will be moving forward using this strategy again. We've produced 4 1-minute shorts that we're going to use to deploy on OTT in web-based video systems and in partnership with schools and other agencies. But our static images here, really we're teaching people specific tips. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood you shouldn't store your apples with other produce. Like a lot of things, they release a lot of ethylene, they over-ripen, you know, keep those separate. We did, this was the advice that took me a long time to accept, not because it's not good advice, but because it needed to be proved safe by some folks. So storing your fresh cut herbs like fresh flowers and water in the fridge, with the exception of basil, where you leave that on the counter. And so we were making sure people got that message. And then our final message was to store onions and potatoes separately. This was our most successful ad. People really enjoyed this. We had these displayed digitally to drive a lot of traffic to our website, but we also printed these banners and set them out strategically at a number of locations where people are accessing food. So we did not get them in any grocery stores. That takes a lot more work than you would think, but they were at pantries, they're at the WIC offices, they're paired now with some community freezers that are coming to the region. So we had great success with this campaign. This was the direct blog traffic that we were tracking. We saw over 2 million ads displayed on digital, and we distributed well over 1,000 of our fruit and vegetable storage guides. So we have a paper version of our food storage guide that we paired with the banners, and well over 1,000 of those were distributed to folks taking them out of boxes. So it was a very successful campaign, and that we were reaching folks in the community. But from Facebook, Instagram, we saw 3,500 people visit the blog, 1,200 from Google, 113 from Reddit. We'd never done anything with Reddit before, so it was a learning curve for us. We had 2,200 people who just visited the website. They just went to wastedfoodstopswithus.org. We love that. 1,900 were unknown, and 1,799 were other. Those are likely from Reddit. The others, our social media people were just hesitant to say that. But we used a number of different analytics software to help us understand who were coming to the website and from where. The website is written so that each page is about a 2-minute read, and we saw that people visited an average of 2.5 pages, and they spent an average of 5 minutes, 50 seconds on the website. And so that means they were reading the content. So that gave us some really great data that of the 10,000 people who visited the blog, they visited 2 pages and spent about 2.5 minutes on each visit. So they were reading those 2.5 pages and getting the information. We had blogs set up for each of our 3 specific strategies, and saw right around 2,000 people visit each of those pages. And then we saw, of the 10,000 people, I would say almost 100% of them visited our food storage guide. So we were very happy to see that. Like I said, this is one strategy in a multitude of strategies that we use at Hamilton County Resource to drive behavior change. And so it is a very exciting project of ours. We've had some great success, and we're really working to develop now some physical assets and partnerships that reach across the community. We're trying to engage our 47 political jurisdictions in the conversation now. But it is resonating. People are talking about it. I like to use some more systemic approaches to collecting data on how things are working, and the buzz is there. The number of partners coming to the table who want to help us deploy this campaign are there. So we're very excited for what this will look like in the coming years.
So Tony, were you able to do any kind of direct measurement of the change in waste in the sense that Leslie did waste audits? Was there any attempt on that side of the measurement scale?
There are a number of interventions we're deploying at one time. So going out and trying to, because we're a solid waste district,
Right.
I should explain, our mission is not to directly impact individual consumers in the community. Our larger responsibility is to the political jurisdiction. So there's an element of our goal is to engage those folks in the conversation. We do collect data on a 3 to 5 year basis. We do waste audits in home garbage cans and in the landfill every 3 to 5 years. And so we're just now doing that evaluation to see what change has come over the last 3 years. There has been a lot of movement within the county. So it's hard for us to look at specific neighborhoods or specific political jurisdictions to identify if they've been reducing waste, because we've targeted zip codes, but people are moving within the county a lot. There's been a lot of gentrification. We have a lot of people who are moving out of the county. And so a lot of our lower income folks are finding themselves more in the suburbs and the exurbs, and being replaced and displaced by wealthier individuals. So it's really hard to look at our intervention campaign, our marketing campaign, and say that it's had a direct impact. What we do know is the type of wasted food has started to change in our region. It's become more vegetative than it has in the past. We tried to look at what was edible and inedible in that audit, and it became really, really difficult because we are working in partnership with consulting firms, and what people determine edible versus inedible, even when you give them clear parameters, is a little wonky. And this was the first time we've ever tried to look at that as a solid waste district. That's not been our primary focus previously. We do also collect diversion numbers. And so we've been collecting numbers on how much waste is diverted from the landfill so that we can understand the role and the impact we have in driving behavior change at the commercial and industrial level. And our food recovery numbers have increased by, I'm just going to ballpark it, say 300% in the last 3 years. Part of that is just more people reporting it and understanding that we like to collect that number. But our major food recovery partners have tripled their operations in the last 3 years and have been really engaged in this campaign with us. So we've seen a huge increase in the amount of recovered food that is upcycled or redistributed. We also have been partnering with more and more pantries on this project. As Leslie said, that's a population that unintentionally gets dumped on. And so helping the pantries advocate for themselves and saying, no, I do not want that food. And the residents or the consumers also saying like, oh, I know how to use that now. I've seen a chef. I've read your fruit and vegetable storage guide. I've been provided with some information and resources on how to do that.
So do you have a sense of how much the campaign cost and what it might cost, what the reduction in cost might be if you wanted to run it again?
Yeah, so we allocate about $100,000 annually to our consumer education campaign around reducing wasted food. It is our largest campaign we're currently running because it is our primary focus as a solid waste district to reduce the organics in the landfill. And food is obviously the one that needs the most attention because most of the food in our landfill is edible, we believe. So we spend about $100,000 a year. It depends on what we're doing. Last year, we did just straight marketing. We used internally created collateral with our marketing team from the county, and we spent, 25 and then $30,000 actually deploying ads on social media. And then we spent just about $4,000 or $5,000 on printed materials that we distributed. We had enough left over then to prepare for this year's campaign, which is much more expensive. We were able to take that overage and then some additional money from this year to hire a marketing or a graphic design firm to create 4 60-second and 4 15-second videos featuring the Freshness Squad. I really thought they'd be ready for today, but they're not. And that group of superheroes will educate people on how to reduce wasted food through food storage with 4 specific tips. That is a much more expensive project that cost about $40,000 to produce those 4 videos. And then we will deploy those this summer as a baseline to see how it performs. And then we will use money next year to deploy that OTT over the top. So on streaming and social media. That's a much more expensive campaign, but we've had a lot of success with our campaigns, engaging folks in the conversation, and we are seeing changes in the way waste is generated in the county. Our residential waste continues to go down, but that's complicated by the fact that we see more and more industry coming to the area. So we think it's working. We believe it's working. Our data is telling us that it's working, so we're willing to invest a little bit more to get some more engaging content out there.
Well, when the videos come out, please send us the link. We'll be happy to post it on our website, and we expect to see them in the Oscars next year.
I mean, I'm hoping. I'm
Carol,
really
you
hoping.
look like you had a question about to come on there. Carol, do you have okay? Anybody else have any questions? Oh, let's see. Richard was asking, what's the relationship between reducing wasted food and providing food for the food insecure?
I have lots of feelings on this. I will say Leslie hit the nail on the head when she was talking about these agencies that give boxes of food. It is a huge challenge of mine to educate people on choice pantry models. Choice consumers in general in the United States have the right to choice. That is something that we've all experienced. We've all gone to the store. We've been able to pick what we want. When we give people a box of stuff, they are not given the choice. And so when you're in a resource limited community and it's really stressful and you're given the choice at home that came in a box of 4 key lime pies or a bag of apples, guess what's going in the landfill? The apples, because life is hard. I am fostering a 6-year-old right now. And you know how hard it was to teach him to make food choices? Not at all. It takes a little bit of effort. I will say I have a degree, in child development. I understand how to do this. but he makes his own food choices. And they are weird, they are wonky. I have to do a lot of correcting, but it is very possible. Everybody has a right and capacity. I shouldn't say everybody, but they have a right and capacity, almost everybody, to make their own food choices. And so part of the problem I find is that our pantries are getting dumped on, and bad food is getting sent down the drain to people who are already resource limited, living in challenging situations, and then throwing that food away again. And so there's a huge opportunity in the commercial sector to recover and redistribute edible food in a variety of ways. There are a number of very successful models here in Cincinnati that are starting to spread across the country. And so those are La Soup, Last Mile Food Rescue. We've long participated and partnered with these agencies. You can definitely check them out, but they make the connection between wasted food and food for the insecure really clear, because they're working at a commercial and industrial level. From a residential perspective, it is very difficult, though there are some cities in the world that have found success with this topic of recovering specific edible food and getting it to people, i.e. packaged and prepared foods. There's also a really great company, Divert, that is providing data analytics to food distributors and sending data back that's saying, like, why did you waste this many apples? They were still very good. Maybe you bought too many. Trying to make sure that those distributors aren't overbuying, but also then taking that food, recovering it, and redistributing it with partners.
Leslie, anything you would add?
I think I don't know what the nature of the question that Richard posted, like what kind of answer he was expecting. But I guess one thing that Tony did not mention that came to mind when I read the question is sometimes I've been asked by the media. There was an app that was released in Denver recently called Too Good To Go, and it essentially provides, like it allows restaurants to put meals on the app at a lower cost for residents to like claim. And so the media was asking, is that going to be in conflict with, food rescue? And my answer is no, not really, because there's just so much food that needs rescuing. So that's what I was thinking when I read the question. I realized it could be answered so many different ways, but it's just like, even if we, do a great job at reducing the amount of food that is wasted in the grocery sector, right now there's just so much, they just make it so much like overage, and a lot of it, like Tony was saying, is really not great. So and that's where we don't see a correction from that sector, is like bakery items. The pantry just don't know what to do with bakery items. They have so many of them. Bananas, and it's like, well, at some point you just gotta buy less bananas. Like the grocery stores need to also, their business model is entirely built on knowing that they're not going to sell everything. So yeah, that's how I came at it, thinking about that. But there's just a lot to be said on the topic, and like the types of food they get, and the fact that it's very difficult for food banks and pantries to tell a donor that they don't want ABC type food item, because like we have a pantry in Denver that I'm not going to name, but one of their policies is they will not give, and it's a free choice model, but they will not display in the, and I have thoughts on that too, but they will not display in the little store they run anything that has more than like 10 grams of sugar. But they were given items by food donors, some food donors of really high like quality retail. So if you're gonna eat a cookie, that's a really good cookie, they throw it. And I think I have a problem with that, because I'm like, tell them you don't want it. But it's just, they don't want to, because there's that kind of like mentality from the retail sector that's like, well, they should be happy with anything we give them. And it's really difficult for them to have that conversation with the donor, because they're afraid if they say no to the cookies and the baked goods, well, then they're going to be looking for a different partner to give these items to. So anyways, there could be a whole webinar on this. It's a really complex thing. I think a lot of it, if you look at like California and what they've done recently, and you could see a lot of the issues with the models and a lot of the challenges and how they're solving these challenges. So, but I just want to point out, I have to run because I actually have another call. So I'm going to have to mosey on.
Well,
but thank you so much.
Yeah, we've run over our time a little bit here, but there's some questions here, and Tony, maybe you can send me some information about the contract templates if they exist. Certainly be happy to share them with everybody. And I'd just like to sort of close by taking a minute here to, first of all, big round of applause for our team. I mean, Good stuff, everybody. Really, really enjoyed it. Certainly, we could have spent another hour here talking through a lot of these questions because this is that R, the reduce R, that gets very little traction and attention in the conversation too often. And so I think this is a place where we should definitely burn some more calories. So with that, before we go, just want to remind everybody we have some great programs coming up here. You can see them on our list here. And if you're not a member, I'd like to ask you please to become a paying member today. We really appreciate that very much. Once again, a big thank you to Carol, Leslie, and Tony for excellent information here today. We'll have the webinar posted on our website probably on Monday or Tuesday at the latest. You're happy to and welcome to share it with any and all who might be interested. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to lunch. For those of you who are hungry and haven't had lunch yet, please go for it. And we hope to see you next time around, and hopefully June 9th at the MRN Swan Mid-Atlantic Conference in Ellicott City. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.